Hello and welcome to our latest and greatest edition of Better Together Arizona. I am your host, Angela Hughey. I am super excited about today, joined by two amazing leaders and co-hosts of the Inclusive AF podcast. What does AF stand for, by the way?
You know what it means, Angela Hughey.
Well,
It means very, very inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous, I think. Yes.
absolutely fabulous. That's it.
That's right.
Well, the Inclusive AF podcast takes a deep dive into the complex and often messy world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, exploring how to build workplaces that are not just diverse, but truly inclusive. Katee,
Yes.
Jackye,
Hi.
to say that DEI is messy right now, that's like the biggest understatement I've made today, right? But I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I'm sure it's going to be important. It's going to be deeply educational and illuminating. So before we get started, we need to let our listeners and viewers know a little bit about the two of you. I'm going to let the Katee Van Horn, my dear friend, start us off. Please let everyone know a little bit about yourself.
Of course, of course. So I'm Katee Van Horn. I am a resident of Arizona. I have lived here for most of my life. I work in the HR field and am currently the Chief People Officer for WebPros, which is a global company. And so it's a very different conversation about DEI when you're talking from that global perspective. But obviously right now, my company, and I think a lot of the companies that, I have acquaintances and friends that are working in HR, we're all very focused on what's happening in the US and the repercussions around the world. But I'm the youngest of 7. I am super bossy and
I can
Jackye-
attest to the super
Yes,
bossy
yeah,
part.
yeah. And I'm okay with it. Assertive, not bossy. That's right. Sorry. That's all I got.
Awesome. And now let's turn it over to the Jackye Clayton, because I've just learned a little bit about Jackye before we started doing the show, and she definitely deserves that the in front of her name.
You think so?
Absolutely. Yes, she does.
Well, my name is Jackye Clayton. I am the most recently, I'm on season 37 of The Amazing Race, which is fun.
Which is why you get the.
Which
Yeah.
is where the "the" comes from. But my background has been in talent acquisition, which had led me, I came to DEI through talent acquisition, finding hard to find talent, but then also helping organizations structure their talent so that they know how to get the talent, how to make sure you're recruiting and also retaining the top talent. So that's my background.
Awesome. I'm excited about this conversation. Okay. So there is a lot going on in the DEI space right now, and we keep hearing this word merit thrown around, right? So thanks to some of the information you sent me, Katee and Jackye, I have a fuller understanding today than I ever did around DEI. But for our listeners and viewers that don't have all of the insights that you two have provided, let's start with this, right? So traditionally, merit has been defined as a combination of natural ability and effort, right? And there's actually like there's a formula for how to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's M, merit, right, equals I, which is intelligence or natural endowments, and E is for effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this view, meritocracy is about rewarding people based on their achievements and how hard they work and how talented they are. So our first question in today's multiple choice DEI question or review is, do you believe that this formula adequately captures what merit means in today's society?
No.
Why?
Well, so for me, merit is really about the outcomes that you achieve and how you achieve those outcomes. So it's about, it's not about how busy are you or how many hours did you put in or how likely are you to be successful.
It's about, did you get the job done?
It's about, did you get the job done? Did you have the outcomes that you set as a goal or whatever that might be? But it's also about, are you, we've heard the term, and I think Google actually came up with it, the brilliant jerk, that, does a lot of work, but leaves, everyone on the side of the road injured because they're just not good at working together and being a team player.
Okay.
So it's really about those outcomes, not just the effort, but the outcomes you achieve. And then how you actually get it done. How do you work with people? How do you achieve the goals that you have?
Well, okay, so in listening to that awesome and thoughtful definition, I know from like a one community standpoint and a full swing standpoint, like our whole thing is like we don't care how many hours in the day it takes you to get your job done. Like we care about like these are the things you need to get done. If you get them done, then we just believe in more like a more flexible workspace and just because we think it's like we create a healthier workforce, right? And at the end of the day, if you're doing good work, I think you reward people by not micromanaging them. But that's me.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you think about intelligence, how are they measuring that? I can think you're really smart. Is that based on your IQ? Is that based on like how would I know that you're really smart?
Well, I put the two of you on the show,
well,
so
yeah,
clearly
that's true.
I'm
I mean,
highly intelligent.
I do know you, yes. So I know you are very intelligent. But like, if you're a manager trying to evaluate an employee, how do you actually gauge that or measure that?
Jackye, anything you want to add?
Yeah, because I also think when you think about merit, what people are trying to look at is really the key competencies that added to whatever that merit is. Like we want to know, can you do the job and how are you getting the job done? Do you have the skills that I decided me hiring person is needed in order to achieve that task? Unfortunately, because as we've talked about before, it's going to be my frame of reference as to what intelligent is
super
really small.
Binary, right?
Right. So, No,
it's did we go to the same school?
Well,
do I know you?
I always say it's like the FBI, back in the day, those of us, Gen X or and above, we used to go to the post office and it would have the FBI most wanted list. And you'd look left and you look right and you're like, nope. And then you just go on, in the line. And it's kind of like that's your only frame of reference. And so you're just looking like at the people that you know and what you think is intelligent looks like.
There's a lot of bias there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this concept of meritocracy suggests that positions should be awarded on competence and performance, not privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how well do you think that this ideal is reflected in the real world when it comes to hiring people?
It's not. And the other part is because if you look at the racism that goes along with this, that people automatically think people who English is a second language is not intelligent. If people that are black and brown are not intelligent.
Well, apparently the current president thinks that our former vice president was a DEI hire, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Even though they're the most qualified, and then make determination, as we can see where that goes, hired people that are completely unqualified. So it's based on their definition of what merit looks like. And so you leave it up to, when you put it with such broad strokes, which is the same challenge that we had with diversity, like what is it? And you heard people not saying the words. And I think until we get really real about what we're trying to do, where we're going, and what the roadblocks are, we're never going to be able to get the hiring part right.
Yeah. Katie?
Yeah. And I think, what Jackye said earlier is spot on. It's what are the competencies of the role and how are they achieving those competencies? And so when we talk about merit today, it has always been, as I, just kind of jokingly said, oh, did they go to the same school that I did? Do they go have beers with me after work? Do they go and work on code on the weekends or whatever it is that is deemed the thing they should be working on over the weekend? And so it's really not based on what outcomes are they achieving and how are they actually getting work done. It's based on, I like you.
And it seems like a sameness.
Yes. And it's absolutely all about, we want the same and we want to have more of the same.
Yeah, which is really interesting because, from a one community standpoint, as we've been, educating around inclusive policy for years, the conversation so often happens in the business community because there's so much research that says having diverse mindsets, right, within your team adds to better outcomes, right? When people can be who they are, right, they are healthier, they stay longer, they're like better advocates for the company or organization that they work for, all of which leads to better outcomes and a more sustainable future for the company or the organization. And so sameness does not have those same results, right?
Well, and taking that even a step further, so Jamie Dimon was being interviewed by one of the financial news. So Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase, and he was talking about the fact that we don't talk about it even in regards to DEI. We talk about it in regards to who are our customers, how are we going to make the best products for our customers. So it would be, cutting off our nose basically to not have a diverse set of people around the table working for us because we want to be in all these different markets. So it's also looking at, I know you know the number off the top of your head of what the spend is of the LGBTQ community.
1.3 trillion.
And why would you turn that away and go, no, we don't need that money. We're good.
Yeah, well, and the spend for the LGBTQ community is 1.3 trillion based on a census that's never asked a direct question, right? And it doesn't include our allies, right?
Yep.
So there's a common sense, piece of this when it really comes to consumerism too. Like, who do we want walking through our doors? I think, to paraphrase what Jamie Dimon's getting across is, if all you see are people that all look the same, then what we're telling is members of diverse communities that you don't belong here, that we don't want you to bank with us, right?
Well, and they turn that into, then you see stereotypes or things that aren't really accurate, and things that aren't. There was a commercial for, I think it was like macaroni and cheese, and in the commercial it was like a white dad and a black wife and her mother and their children. And he was trying to like serve the macaroni and cheese, and he like took it away, and they all were like, ha 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 ha. And I was like, now y'all know that is not how that would go down. That's not realistic. Somebody who's not from our community made the script. Like, everybody who watches it, who's black in really small, like, we'll say black in Waco that are my friends.
Okay.
We all saw that. Right? So you see a lot of things right now that feel really inauthentic as being a member of a community because you don't have the diverse voices to come in.
My friend, our dear friend, Bettina Nava, likes to use the term cultural fluency.
Right.
So you don't have the cultural fluency to create this enactment of this bicultural family, right?
I was like, that would absolutely never happen. And so that's what people have a hard time recognizing, that people that are different might be more qualified, the most qualified, because that's what we're missing right now.
Yeah.
Right? That cultural fluency that you're referring to. And so people have a hard time being able to say, no, you're not always going to be the best person from the job based on merit,
and we're
because
all
there's
just
other pieces.
We're like we're just a walking roadmap of our experiences too, right? And so if you're not bringing diverse experiences, right, and diverse mindsets and cultures into the conversation, then again, you just have this like very binary like way forward, which is really bad for business, right? I mean, I think it's absolutely totally illogical, but also just at the end of the day, it doesn't make good business sense.
No.
Yep. Okay. All right, so let's talk about how DEI challenges these traditional views then, right? Can you talk about specific examples, and I think you're kind of going there already, Jackye, of how factors such as race and gender and socioeconomic status can impact someone's ability to demonstrate their merit and actually creates systemic barriers?
Yes. So one of the things that's interesting is that I try to explain it more recently, like, the DEIB people are like wedding planners. And it was like, when people get married, we're trying to plan that one day. You take a year, maybe 2 years to plan that one day, and you're making sure everything's perfect so you can have a nice time. When you take the wedding planner out of it, it can be hysteria. Things aren't getting right. Like, oh, I didn't know that you had a baby. We didn't have anything for the kids or whatever, blah, blah. And so we're looking at these organizations, and when nobody's looking at these things to make sure people feel like they're included, that we have all of these pieces, then people are living in fear. When you're living in fear, you can't do your best work.
Right.
And when you're putting those things up, these are the barriers that you're putting up. So now I already know going to work every day, you don't care about me.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to navigate my way through. I mean, prior to starting One Community, when my wife Sherry and I were working in our professional capacities, prior to jumping off this cliff 16 years ago, we used to have really thoughtful and difficult conversations when one of us wanted to come out at work, right? Because you don't have equal protection still.
That's right.
In the state of Arizona. I mean, unless you're in one of the 11 municipalities that have equal protections. Through municipal ordinances, it's not unlawful to fire someone simply based on their sexual orientation or gender identity, right? And my whole thing is like, well, it should be skills based, right? So, and that's what we're all trying to get to from an equal policy standpoint. and the great discomfort and agitation that we would have when we were discussing whether or not we would come out at work, right? Because if I put a picture of her on my desk, I could literally lose my job. It wasn't
Right.
performance based. It was simply based on the fact that I was different.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always had to outwork everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like you have that. Not only do you have to outwork anyone, but you don't have to outwork everyone. It's one of those things where you feel like you do, and sometimes it's like, okay, is it me? Do I think I'm doing? Or am I trying to prove myself
Yeah.
to myself? It's almost because they teach us to hate us.
Mm.
And
Because
so
because
we
we're just
internalize
different.
that.
Yeah.
So we internalize those things where there's an expectation, and when you don't feel safe, then we will internalize like, oh, I wonder if it's because of these other factors. So you're not able to be as innovative. You're not sharing ideas. You're not getting promoted. You're not sharing your best ideas. When you do, you're over. You're talked over. Like these are the things that happen. And
Because you're in a workforce that doesn't have inclusive policies in place and hasn't really created a sense of belonging for everyone on their team.
because we aren't, I always say we're all equal under the law, but some are more equal than others, right? We're not. We don't have the same opportunities. There is no thing as pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. It depends on so many various factors. And to think that everyone's gotten the same opportunities is just ignorant.
Yeah, it's false. I was with our family over the holidays, and I was talking to our nephew, and so he did really well in school, came out of ASU, started a job. Like he's making really good money. All of his roommates are making really good money too, and they have a friend staying with them. And all of his roommates are white, highly educated, right? And they have a friend that they've taken in who's a young man of color who is like working 2 jobs to put himself through like a technical school right now. And he sleeps on their couch. And my nephew says to me, like, I've never had to think about sleeping on someone's couch to get by, or I've never had to work 2 jobs just to try and put myself through school. Like our family took really, really great care of us. And what an enlightening experience it's been for him, and how dedicated he and his friends were to really, really helping their friend succeed, right? Trying to help make sure that he had a stable place so that he could do the things that he needed to do to succeed. But what an eye-opening experience it is for a 22-year-old to just say, we've just had such totally different lived experiences, and I don't think I ever realized just how good I've had it, and continue to have it, and how the doors open for me in different ways than they do for my friend until they've gone through this experience. And I think, anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's what's so sad. I don't think people recognize when you talk about the majority group, like we're talking about race in this particular instance. When I look at pictures and I'm like, when you look at this picture and you don't see any Black people in the picture, like, do you know? Like, I notice if I see a party and I'm like, there are nobody that looks like me at that party.
Yeah.
Like, I notice those things. And I was like, do you notice those things? Like, do you notice that this is what's happened where you're not getting all of the opportunities? Like, you think this is the real world that you live in. And it's going to slap you in the face as things progress, because we know it's not going in that direction.
Right.
And the more the pendulum is swinging this way, the harder it's going to go in the other direction.
I feel like so much is tension right now, and I'm totally off the script, so I'll find our way back when we can get there. But no, this is just such a thoughtful conversation and honest conversation. I think so much of this tension is because if you look at Gen Alpha, the kids that are in school right now, they are the first minority-majority generation in America's history. And every generation that has come before them, right, we continually become more and more culturally diverse. Each generation has, right? So Gen Z was really close to becoming a minority majority generation. Millennials, like I'm Gen X, just as you are, Jackye, and every generation gets more and more culturally diverse. Add to that you do have more safety in society overall, right? In just authentically being who you are based on your sexual orientation or gender identity. And so more people now know folks that are members of the LGBTQ plus community. And if there are stats out there that say that like 20% of Gen Z identify as being members of the LGBTQ plus community, right? So there's just humanity is really beautiful and it is absolutely complex and diverse. And if you're only seeing, a team or a society where there's a lot of sameness, you're missing out. But also, I think folks that have been a part of the majority for so long now feel threatened, right? Add to that women make up the majority. There's more women than men. Although do we have equal pay yet? I'm not sure.
No, not quite. Not
Maybe
quite
we'll
there.
save that for another
One day.
day.
One day.
Anything you want to add to that, Katie?
So I think the other piece that I would just add is having those different people at the table, having those other voices is one part of it. The other piece, I think, and this is kind of what Jackye was alluding to, it's, are they being heard? Because we can create these environments or take a pledge, go, we have seen a lot of these diversity initiatives be completely flipped in the last 2 months.
Right.
And then you start to question, what were you really doing?
Was it just a checkbox, right?
Or were you truly committed to creating an environment where everyone felt safe, felt like they could be heard, felt like their ideas were heard? And that's the piece that I'm like, if you can switch off DEI in a month, there's
it wasn't integrated anyway.
That's right. Correct.
Also, I think the word belonging confuses people sometimes because I think that people think that belonging means sameness as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Belonging means diverse voices, right? But I think that there's the rub right now is that DEIB, if you will, is about people that are progressive and members of diverse communities and
woke.
Yes.
We're all woke.
I am awake. I will tell you that.
Glad to be there.
I will tell you that. I am very, very awake right now.
Yeah.
More awake than I would like to be.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I'm going back to the script. Here we go.
All right.
So, how can organizations effectively address and mitigate the effects of implicit bias in their evaluation process? Because your point too, Katie, is if you can just roll this back so quickly, you weren't very far along and you weren't doing this in an authentic way anyway, right?
Right. I think, the pieces that always come to mind for me are, you can say you're doing certain things, but if you're in the room and it's only one group of individuals, gender-wise, LGBTQ, whatever category, whatever you want to look at, then for sure it's not an environment where all voices are heard. Or if you look at the top of an organization and it's all white males, not all voices are being heard. And, I joke around, I am in a global company. And so we joke that we have a lot of Germans. And so, that's just part of what I'm working on, is getting more women on our leadership team, but also folks that are not German. I claim Dutch and German, depending on what day it is, depending on who I'm talking to. But when you bring that back to the US and kind of what's going on here, it's how do you truly create an environment where Jackye can show up for a meeting in braids and it's okay, and no one's saying, "Oh, can I touch your hair? Oh, that's different. Why are you doing that?" Or that she can show up and have the best idea in the room, and she's recognized for having the best idea in the room, and you go with that idea. And I don't mean that every single time that a person of color speaks up, that's the idea you have to go with, but acknowledging that they're bringing things to the table that you maybe hadn't thought about. And I think that's also just good leadership.
I was going to say that's good management,
yes,
right?
Yeah, as a leader, I don't want to be the smartest one in the room. I want all of my folks to say, here's what we should do instead. And because I've been doing this for 400 years. So yeah, I've been there, done that. I want my team to go, yeah, but you haven't tried it this way. Should we try it this way? Yeah, let's do that. Let's try that out and see if it works.
Well, again, because diverse viewpoints, that the sense of belonging. So, you feel like you can bring a variety of ideas to the table, and then you're going to get a better outcome. So again,
Absolutely.
I think that's just good management and really good at just running an organization. Okay.
Right. But we're all Gen X as well.
Yeah.
And so I think the other piece, there's been so many conversations throughout the years of how different generations show up at work.
Yeah.
And there's been so much, I especially think, Gen X and, Gen Y, Gen Z, there was a lot of, wow, these folks they're not committed to work. They have a different way of thinking about work, all of these things. But the shift we've seen because of that has been so positive. I think, we're talking about flexibility. I don't care how many hours you work. I want you to get the job done.
Yeah.
You have things outside of work, have at it. Have a great time. I like to go hiking. I can't do that at 2:00 in the afternoon in Arizona during the summertime. So what are my options when I'm starting at 5 a.m. talking to my colleagues across the pond? Like, so you think about flexibility in a lot of different ways and what works for people, but you also think about, again, who's not at the table, who has an idea that we want to hear from that might be different than what we ever thought of.
And how do they show up? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I have these multiple hats. So I'm putting on my ADHD hat. One of the things that's really challenged for people that are neurospicy, as we like to say, is that people in trying to be friendly talk around in circles, and people that are on the spectrum do not understand what you're talking about when you're like, oh, do you want to go fill out this form? It's like, no, I don't. Thanks for asking. And then it's like, oh, wow, she never wants to do anything, because we don't want to be direct. And so understanding what that might look at, instead of saying this person is lazy, doesn't follow instructions, all of these things, like maybe I didn't do. Yeah, I process. So maybe me as a manager, when I'm doing performance reviews, need to know when I do your self review, if you're doing those, or what things do you want us to consider when we're doing your performance review. Look at those types of things and educate yourself on ways that different people potentially show up. We know women and various cultures use the word we did instead of saying I did, where you see that like on cultural levels, those things show up differently. And so it's important that you understand what biases you potentially have, and then research how these things can come up when you're talking to somebody who's different than you.
But I would also add to that, when women do say they get punished.
Right.
So it's also, again, changing the bias that we all have in our heads to say, it's okay that this person is assertive and is taking credit for doing an amazing job. They shouldn't be punished, right, because they are a rock star.
Yeah.
And I think if it was it's the, Stanford University, the Clayton Institute, they had the switch it to test it concept. Gina Davis also with the Gina Davis Institute, it was the same thing. It was flip it to test it. If a man says something and you would be okay with it, but a woman says something and you wouldn't be okay with it, ask yourself why.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think you can insert any group there.
We need to have that study happen. Like we should do a focus group on it.
Yes,
Definitely.
absolutely.
Okay. So Katee, I want to go back to the fact that you work for a global company and there's too many Germans, right? Because
to be clear, I love all the Germans that I work for, especially my boss. Yes,
but
yes.
I don't want you hiring someone that is French, say, because of reasons of tokenism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So like, what are the warning signs of tokenism, and how can organizations avoid tokenism? No. Don't hire me just because I'm French.
Don't hire me just because I'm French. That would be the first one. But I think it's looking at, this is where the message I think sometimes gets lost. Is the minute we say diversity, or we want to look at a diverse sourcing or a diverse group of folks to apply for the job, that type of thing, then there's somehow this switch that people go, oh, so we're lowering the bar, which is such a falsehood and such a horrible thing to say, because then it's an automatic, those others are lesser than, which is not the case. Of course, you're still looking at the competencies, looking at what you need for the role, what experience you're looking for, all of these things. But instead of Stanford, maybe they went to an HBCU, or maybe they, have experience in
maybe they went to a ASU or a U of A, right?
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. I was speaking to someone the other day about just the fact that pretty much in every state, they have schools for every type of degree that you might want. So you can stay in state. But there is still this, little hiccup of, oh, well, it's not Ivy League, or if it's not whatever, then it's not as good as. But, for me, it's look at the competencies. What are you trying to achieve with the role? What are the outcomes you need? And then hire for that. But just broaden that pool of candidates that you look at and where you're looking.
So and it's not just from the Ivy League.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think, that's the work that Jackye does all day long, every day, is where else can we look? And we know a lot of people are going to those HBCUs, going to the lesbians who tech, different things like that. And so it's, how do we also expand even from there to say, where else can we look that we haven't looked already?
So it seems like there just needs to be education that diversity does not mean that you are lowering standards. It just means that you're looking at a more diverse pool of candidates, essentially, right?
But you
And
still have that, sorry, I
no,
do not
go.
mean to interrupt you, but you still have that bias of, well, there's not a lot of women that are in this field, or there's not a lot of folks that identify as whatever in this field. So like technology is a great one. I just had a conversation last week with a manager, and he said, well, Katee, as soon as I start looking for this language, that pretty much eliminates most women because not a lot of women know this programming language. And that is a false statement. It's just, where are you looking? If you're looking the same places you've always looked, you're right. It's probably all going to be men.
So you
where
need to
else are you
broaden
looking?
your
Exactly.
okay.
Or narrow. We see people
Right.
say broaden it. I always say no. You need to narrow your pool. Like use the data when you see what organization or where do you see the majority of women engineers that have that skill set. If it's going to be Silicon Valley, then and you work remote, then post it in Silicon Valley so that you have the greater opportunity. Are you posting where these people are going, partnering with different organizations
Got it.
to be able to do it? So I don't say it's like broaden your mind, but narrow your search and make sure that you're doing it with intention.
Mm-hmm.
Broaden your mind, but narrow your search and intentionally search.
Because then you have
That's a
extra
bumper
proof
sticker
that they're
waiting to
qualified
happen.
for the job. That's the challenge again, because that's why you need experts in this field. Don't wing it. You just can't do it. I always say, no, we want to be more specific. You will hear people say, in order to have a bigger candidate pool, we need to lessen the requirements to make it real open. And I too was part of that camp. And I thought that because, like I said, talent acquisition has been my sweet spot. But then I realized that that was doing a great disservice because then we are rejecting more people and people, it appears and feels like you're rejecting people based on gender or, whatever community that they're coming from because there's so many because you didn't narrow the specifications of the job. But when you can get real accurate, real specific at what you're looking for, then I always say everyone that I submit to you as a hiring manager is qualified for the job based on the specs that you have. Like, let's find out what exactly you're needing and why so that you can find the talent. And then you don't have that problem in the back end saying that you're not hiring qualified people.
Great. We clearly need to be looking at all of this, like from the exact opposite perspective that most people have. It sounds.
That's right.
Okay, got it. All right. So we have merit, we have DEI. How do we reconcile these things, right? So my next question is, how can organizations effectively identify and value diverse skills? But I think you're already going there. Perspectives and lived experiences.
Right. So I think that's really asking the question, like, is there a voice that we're missing? Let's talk about our product or our thing or our widget, whatever we're trying to do. Is there anybody's voices that are missing in the product development, in the testing, or in customer success? Is there a voice missing that can help that we might be missing? And then analyze what your business is doing as far as where your successes are and where you might be slipping. And then try to say, see if there's any through lines where you can say, this piece, they don't have anybody from this spot, and they also have a high turnover, and we see a majority of women leaving the organization within that department. Let's look deeper and see what's going on. And maybe we need other kinds of voices to make sure that people feel comfortable. You can make that assessment if you have a revolving door. Too often, people look at the front end of this process without looking at the back end. And so many DEIB people that I know of are trying to hold the back door shut as we're stuffing the front door because there's a piece missing in the middle of this and explaining that, again, people think belonging when you were talking about that everybody, they will misinterpret that as saying everybody's happy and it's kumbaya.
And we all think the same.
And no, again, it brings conflict. It makes sense that we're going to, because when we have those conflicts, we will come out on the other end together because we came up with a solution and we realize that we can take different perspectives and we can have a success and a value. That's why diversity works. That's how the innovation happens and all of those pieces.
Yep.
But I think that also brings up a good point. It's really hard to lead a diverse team. As a leader, it is very hard to have different cultures, different backgrounds, different perspectives, because you will have that tension. So it's also, how are you managing that tension in a healthy way that everyone feels heard, that you can come to a good outcome together with everyone being a part of the conversation. And I don't mean talk it to death and every meeting doesn't need to be a brainstorming session, but it can be very, very difficult to channel all of the different generational differences, gender differences, backgrounds, perspectives, all these things. And so as a leader, you need to know how to navigate that and how to actually leverage that in the right way.
Well, you have to know how to lead. And
Right.
part of the problem is we have our Gen X people. We know there's a lot of middle management. That's a bunch of crap. And we have these people later I'll come back so we can talk about term limits. We have all of these people that are used to managing through
A certain
threatening
way. Yeah.
and like duress, and you're going to do what I follow. That's trickled down. And then we have this huge chunk that's responsible right now that don't know how to manage anyway. And me yelling and telling people isn't working. And this next generation will leave in 3 seconds when you say you can't wear flip-flops in the office. They're like, I'm gone. So they have no idea how to do that. Again, this is why it's important to have people who understand and can coach you through working with people from different backgrounds in order to see the success.
Anything you want to add, Katie?
No, I think that's spot on.
That's a miracle. She's never done
Jackie's
that.
perfect
Never,
in every
ever,
way.
ever in the 4 years we've been doing this.
Whatever.
Not one time.
Okay, so we need better management and we need and actual leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
But talk about like what happens when it goes right. Like when you have a diverse team, how does that really enhance an organization's like problem solving and innovation capabilities? Katie, you're both saying like there's tension here and there's rub, but you're also saying that if you do this correctly, you are getting better outcomes.
100%. I think that's the thing that people like when you're able to, again, leverage that healthy discourse, those conversations, you're going to come up with the best ideas. And it's about the best idea winning, not I've been here the longest or I'm the loudest. It's what's the best idea at the table and let's go with that. And also, what else could we add in? And what else could we think about that we hadn't thought of before for that end customer so that we can sell more of the widget, whatever that widget might be. And I think that's the piece that people don't realize the true business bottom line impact of this sometimes, where it is, if I have an organization where I'm looking at who all of my customer base is today, but also who I want my customer base to be, you can knock it out of the park if you are leveraging your team in the right way. And so, it's all about outcomes again. And if you are measuring outcomes, not just, hey, you worked 40 hours today, great, but you didn't do anything, then that's a very different conversation of, oh, this week you completed X, Y, and Z, and that's going to help us with the bottom line.
Yeah. Okay. So you've both laid out like just I think a really remarkable roadmap on why diversity, equity, and inclusion within the business community and belonging, right, builds better outcomes, right? So this is the real world proof that DEI works really well, right? But we are living in this really unique time, right, since January 20th, where we have a new administration that is saying that DEI is the problem and getting rid of woke people and ending wokeness. Wokeness must go broke, right? Will cure all of our society's ills, right? How do you navigate that? How does a business and or organization that wants to have a truly inclusive culture where all diverse voices belong navigate their way through what I would say is a really, really gusty time that we're having here in America and then throughout the world really right now, right? Because what this administration says and does with these executive orders is reverberating not just throughout the United States, but in other parts of the world as well.
I think right now, I can't tell you. I think people are terrified. So I don't know the answer. And I'm seeing people do the pushback. But what I would like to say is, like, the type of work that we do isn't going to change. We're still looking for the best talent. We're still trying to look for these various outcomes. I don't care what you call it. That's just the world of work. You want to be able to hire the best people. You want them to be happy and be proud to be able to work in those organizations. But I think what we will end up seeing is this huge pushback. I mean, I know within again, in my community, it's like there's a list of organizations that did not walk away from their commitment to DEI. And it's like, okay, we're all going to go to Costco on this day.
Yeah.
We're all going to go and buy this. We're only going to buy these products. Like, but it's only a small majority. And so I think that you can vote with your feet and you can vote with your dollars. If you don't think there's anything you could do, like it might be time to look for another organization, because they're basically saying they don't care about you.
Yeah.
Because we all want to be able to go to work where we feel safe. We all want to feel like want to be able to belong. And if somebody can be bullied into becoming a threat to me, it's not a good place to work. It's just not.
Yeah.
You could be profitable, like you might be able to eat well, but you're not going to be able to sleep well. And so you need to make that determination for yourself.
And to your point, Jackye, I have a sense that a lot of people are going to be on the market looking for their next career opportunity. Like my sense in this is that people will vote with their feet, right? And there's a balance, right? Like you have to do the things you need to do to make the business and the operation work, right? And I think prior to this incoming administration, there was a lot of push, in particular from younger team members, right? On like really, really kind of demanding that the business community take public stances on a number of issues, including LGBTQ inclusion. And so I think the business community was grappling with like, how do we make sure we have inclusion and belonging and a diverse team? But we actually are in business too, and advocacy is not the business that we're in, right? And so I think with all of these EOs and these legal challenges and a new administration that is really beating this drum that is so voraciously anti-DEI. I mean, I agree that we're headed for like great upheaval, and I think that a lot of folks are going to look for different places to work, right? If they don't feel like their employer is doing something that's not performative, right?
Well, and you have to educate yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because when we're looking at executive orders, we're not looking at laws. We are looking at stuff within, if you're an OFCCP compliant organization that has federal contractors, they specifically have rules that they no longer, that they're pulling out. But when you're looking at the broader spectrum of the world at work, at this point, and this is the opposite of what I would have said a couple of years ago, like, you can just do your job and just shut up and do what's important to be able to get through, so you're not making yourself a target and you're not putting those things out, but still being able to do good work and allow it to be so good that your employees are advocating for your organization of this being a great place to work. Like, that is going to be, when you're starting to do that, you'll see something different. Because one of the things that was always a challenge for me every year is that I would put out my DEIB report, right? But and it shows the whole process and everything else. Now, you look at other reports that people put out, they'll put their finances, but they don't put the whole process of what it looks like to try to share that it's fair and equitable or whatever. And so you don't have to put all those things out. But what you do have to do is take care of your employees at whatever cost. I don't care what somebody's in the White House says. You have to take care of your employees. How are you gonna do that? And so that's why we have to put people first and look at your organization first. Because the thing that's scary is a lot of the places are saying we're no longer gonna have a pride parade, and we're no longer gonna fund, whatever, insert organization here.
Yeah.
But that was never taking care of your employees to make sure that they had a safe environment. That was always performative.
Yeah.
And so that's why we go back to the conversation, whereas this is real work. You have to find real people who are qualified to do this work. Your ability to do this work is not being a member of a underrepresented community, and understand that this is like human resources. This is why you have people teams. Like, we understand these things. And so don't be performative. Look at what you're doing, and you can call it merit-based hiring,
Call it whatever you want
employee
to call it. Be
engagement,
authentic.
retention programs.
Yep.
But be authentic to what your company mission and values are. And if if your company values and mission does not include taking care of employees, there's your sign.
Well, and the marketplace will just take care of you
That's
because
right.
you won't stay in business.
That's right.
So do good work, be authentic, and take care of your employees is what I'm hearing.
Yes, because then it's not, oh, well, the stakeholders said you're not going to do DEIB. When everyone's saying this is a great place to work and look at me and I can show pictures and this is my whole team and everybody is different. Because what happens at the other side of the conflict that we were talking about is such immense pride of being able to come together, and you will sit there and say, remember when, and I didn't feel this way, and I wasn't sure, and I learned so much, which is what all employees want to do, an opportunity to learn and grow. We know that we don't learn and grow from doing everything the same. We learn and grow from conflict. We learn and grow from failure. This is an ultimate failure that we're going to learn and grow from, that we didn't want to have in this way, but we will learn from this. And so it's going out there, not being afraid of having those things and looking at this as an opportunity for some great learnings. And so we have an opportunity, as long as you're paying attention, it'll be great on the other side of it.
Yeah, from a one community standpoint, we always say that there is great opportunity in adversity. And while these times are adverse, I agree with you. There is so much for all of us to learn, and the opportunity, and I think the path forward will reveal itself. We just have to, in so many ways, trust one another and trust ourselves.
I
Thank
agree.
you both.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
absolutely.